Well, here we are back again Tuesday this week, recapping UFL week 3 here, previewing UFL week 4. Lots of stuff going on. Andy and I had batted around doing the show. Yeah, I thought I was going to have to work yesterday. No show last Friday, was out of town. Big show coming up. I will preview that on Friday, but first let's get Andrew Murray in here. Andrew, how are you doing?
Good, man. You survived LA.
We did. Made it all the way to Bakersfield, my old stomping grounds, and back. Hung out with some of the friends there, Orlando and Adam, saw my old station. 14 years since I left Bakersfield. I hadn't really done that math. Made me feel very old.
I mean, I've been through Bakersfield before. It's a town. That's all I can say about it, really.
It's a town. It's a town. I appreciate. Yeah, we were going to go. I thought I was going to have to film late yesterday. So we said, okay, let's do it today. And then I ended up, my gig was done at noon. And then we were okay, we were going to do it. And then we had all the Chase Garbers news coming down. So we'll be able to do that today. We'll kind of we'll do TV ratings via Mike Mitchell. We'll do attendance, thoughts on that. We'll do the Chase stuff. We'll kind of, we won't probably do week or game by game breakdowns of everything just because it's Tuesday, but we'll talk through the weekend. We'll preview all that stuff. No show last week, but coming up this Friday, USFL historian Paul Reese is going to be joining the show. We were going to do that last week. Was hoping to get a little league support with some interviews, so we will see. I'm got my hooks out for a good XFL guest as well, someone from one of the teams. I think you would like Andy, but Paul Reese confirmed, and then for all you CFL heads, Dave Nails coming back on. So we're going to be talking the Edmonton Elk sale and the Chad Kellys of it all, and maybe get Dave's thoughts on what he thinks of it. What is a UFL? All of that stuff. Andy, does that sound exciting?
Well, I mean, it's your biannual meeting with Dave. You got to have it, right? You meet him at the Grey Cup and you got to have him on the podcast once in a while. I mean, the CFL is so honestly, I was thinking about the CFL this whole weekend. I think some of us joked in the chat about some of the CFL previews because, I mean, it's not that far away. Training camps are going to happen before we know it, and the draft will come through. So I hate to already be on to the next league and thinking about CFL, but I have to give it credit. I've gotten fully integrated with CFL fandom the last few years, and I really wish, like, it's going to be interesting having kind of not having them at the same time and as the USFL and now be able to cross over from UFL over to CFL in a smooth transition. So, I mean, I always love having your CFL fans. I know your CFL fans are clamoring for you to have your CFL guests on.
Yeah, we'll get it. Yes, what I was going to say is I will like not having to do whatever it was, 32 weeks straight or whatever of post-game recaps and all of that on Monday. So that'd be good. We'll do the UFL here and then we'll do that. Getting here, Mike Mitchell, loving. Yes, I brought out, I have so many good jerseys, but I get so perspirated during the podcast. And so I try to kind of layer, but I need to bring out more of this stuff because I have a whole, I had my John Cena one last week and I have this. So we'll do all that. Yes, Philip doing that as well. First off, I guess just breaking news reactions. Do you want to talk Chase, the Chase Garbers news, or do we want to do TV ratings? Where do you want to go first?
I think we got to talk about Chase first.
Okay, so let's talk about Chase. I'll pull up the story here. Yeah, we were like, literally, we would have been just going live yesterday before all this comes out. But, Laughing Matter, big deal, right? San Antonio Brahmas quarterback, Chase Garbers, they Brahmas lose the game. He gets injured, kind of all of that stuff. What do you make of that? Let me pull up Mike's story here.
It's a tremendous shame. Chase Garbers was off to a scintillating start in that offense. He was accurate. He was poised. He already had an epic comeback under his belt with the game they had against Memphis. Apparently, he got injured in the middle of this game and still managed to play through the injury. He actually was on a heater in the fourth quarter for San Antonio when they were trying to come back against the Battlehawks. And it's really just a detriment to the whole operation of San Antonio's offense. And the same thing happened last year when Brandon Silvers got hurt. This offense just never looked the same with AJ Smith and this entire staff when their head guy got hurt. And here you have the same situation with Garbers, almost around the exact same time that Silvers got hurt. So it's almost eerie in that way. Unfortunately, I don't know, as far as their options go, for people who are fans of Quentin Dormady, he might get his chance again. He might be blowing his horn and charging in, but there have been speculation about who or what could be done, like who they could pick up and what kind of players they could add in Chase's stead. But the fact of the matter remains right now, they've lost their number one starter. And you were talking about a potential MVP candidate. So this is really just devastating for the Brahmas.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's one of those, like you said, it's so hard to build kind of the continuity. We're getting all these reps, we're getting everything going. To go down like this, obviously losing the game anyway, going down to 2-1 for that. I don't know. I mean, we had batted around, do we call PJ Walker? Do we call Cole McDonald? Do we call any of these people? We kind of batted around in our group chat. I don't know what the best option here is. And kind of, I think I think he was doing the media avail today. I was getting my teeth worked on. So I would have hopped on that to kind of see what he had going on. His is either today or tomorrow. I can't remember because AJ was working on that as well, AJ Smith. But yeah, I mean, he goes this weekend. What do you think? Does the offense look any remotely similar with Dormady there?
I mean, the question with Dormady is, can he be as efficient as Garbers? I mean, Dormady's arm, I have a lot of faith in just based on some of the tape that he put on for the Guardians last year, and he was pretty accurate down the field. Garbers obviously operates much more in the efficiency standpoint in terms of throwing a lot of screens, throwing a lot of seam routes, throwing a lot of these shorter routes, and letting a lot of the players do yards after the catch, like Jontre Kirkland, Cody Latimer, Anthony McFarland, all these weapons that they have on the Brahmas offense. And now you bring in a different kind of passer with Dormady. Can he do the same things? I think he can if he's able to be coached up. I believe in his ability. I just wonder as far as the overall efficiency. I mean, one of the most impressive things about this team was they started off the game 3 for 3 on fourth down. So even when their backs up when we're against the wall, they still always had a great game plan down by down. And they only failed on a fourth down at the very end of the game when they were trying to come back when they were down by 7. So, I mean, I'm not sure if this accuracy is going to be there. I do think maybe some of the downfield passing game might open up a little bit. But again, that's not always in the cards for AJ Smith's operation. So we'll see how he adjusts. It's interesting you bring up PJ Walker. He's currently an unrestricted free agent, but it's one of those things where we see this in some of these leagues where once you make enough of a name of yourself, you sort of get your paycheck from the NFL, and then you're kind of indoctrinated in their system, and you just kind of cycle through the rest of eternity. I mean, that's happened with a number of guys that managed to make it there. Some of them now, I mean, there are a couple names like Chris Streveler. He's going back to the CFL. He was in the NFL for a few years. You've had Josh Johnson. I mean, he was in the NFL. He went to the AAF. Now he's back in the NFL, has been in the NFL. He's not really seemingly going to be joining into these spring leagues ever again. So it really depends on the personality of the player, what they're looking for, what kind of opportunities they have. Do they just want to play, or do they want to, make a paycheck or try to work their way onto an NFL team? So I don't know if PJ Walker is really realistically a chance. I think it'd be shocking if he really actually came back. I mean, it would be gargantuan. It'd be like if Nathan Rourke went back to the BC Lions. It really would be.
Well, and the whole idea, and we were talking that the PJ Walker, maybe in another year, that makes sense, where he's still so fresh, kind of coming off of this, the practice squads and kind of all that stuff, where he's still hovering around, and God knows what's going to happen with the draft next week and everything else going on that way. And so, yeah, he would, God forbid he comes in here and gets hurt or whatever, and then isn't able to make it, into camp. I think that's kind of unrealistic, but that would be. At least I don't know. Do casuals get excited? I don't know if PJ Walker to the UFL is like a casual. Oh, we got to go. I mean, I think the fans of the league would go crazy, but I don't know if that has the same kind of impact. As even like doing the Matt Corral kind of someone that was just there. Do you think that pops like a casual fan rating?
I don't think so, but certainly for people who followed the XFL, absolutely, they would go bonkers. And people, obviously Texas residents, would go bonkers because he played over in Houston. I mean, PJ Walker was 5-0. He was on pace to throw 30 touchdowns in that XFL season, which is insane. I mean, that is gargantuan numbers in a spring league, but I don't think he really moves the needle for the casual viewership, as you said. But the thing that I really kind of took away from this, especially with these injuries happening, especially we'll get to Case Cookus and sort of his plight right now. It's a risk for some of these quarterbacks to come back to these leagues because offensive line is everything. And there's already talk at the NFL level about there not being enough offensive linemen. And it's something that we talk about in spring leagues. I mean, they're just not in that big of supply. And also defensive linemen are getting more athletic and they're getting more dynamic. As a quarterback, it's really a risk injury that is not worth the compensation that you get, or maybe the notoriety that you could receive if you played well enough in the league. So for a lot of these free agents, and maybe in talks with their actual agents at home, they may not find that it's overall long-term good play to be in these leagues in terms of just the injury risk. And I kind of can't fault them because we've seen it happen. I mean, we see it at all levels of football, but especially when there's a chance that you could be signed by an NFL team, you don't really want to throw caution to the wind like that if you really think it's possible you could get hurt.
Well, it's kind of like, and this is such, but like that was why The Rock for years, they're like, hey, we want The Rock to come back to WWE, and The Rock's like, I have a $200 million movie I'm working on. Like, I'm not gonna go risk, and I mean, The Rock made $9 million here coming back for WrestleMania, which is crazy. But yeah, I'm not gonna go like we have bigger sites as I said here than 4 weeks or whatever. I mean, by the time he gets in, I mean, that was even like the Benkurts of it, where by the time we get in, okay, like he obviously whoever you bring in won't play this week. Okay, so now we're next week. Okay, now we're in the week 5 already. You just have to wonder, like, I don't doubt Wade and AJ's like motivation. Some of the time, some of this USFL coaches, the Jeff Fishers of the world, like, we're fine. Like, are we really making a push here for the last 4 weeks? Like, do you sense that? And because I do think it's interesting how all these coaches would kind of attack this situation.
I mean, you can make in-season trades maybe with other teams, and maybe there's a quarterback that was on a roster last year. But again, it depends on what their priorities are and where they're going. And I always think about quarterbacks that got injured last year. I mean, I don't know, is he interested in doing that again? What would happen if someone like Luis Perez got hurt? I'm not trying to wish that on anybody, but like if he got hurt, would he even consider coming back, or has he made enough of a name of himself that he would say, maybe I'm good? I'm just speculating in that way. But I mean, for these coaches, you have to really think outside the box. You of course want to have backups. I mean, there's some teams like Birmingham who they don't care. They'll just plug anybody in and they make it work, but we'll get onto them later. But for the reality of a lot of these teams, you have to have somebody in place that knows the system and is able to work within it. And it really depends on who they want. I mean, the Battlehawks really like somebody like Nick Thiano last year. Does he work on a team like San Antonio? I'm not so sure. You could throw a lot of names out there, but again, unless you know the system and you are confident in what they bring to the table, and if they want to be part of it, it's really threading a needle. And I'm not sure it's as simple as people make it seem to be in terms of just signing a name.
Yeah, and like I said, not that, but just to kind of put it in. I know we live and die by all of this, right? And the XFL, the merger, and like, it's like, do we just do you punt on this season? I mean, I know even people with the league, like, we're just trying to kind of get through this year and then figure out what we want to do next year and how we want to brand. Like, I don't know. I think that this isn't like we're making the Chiefs are trying to get the triple threat and like we got to go back again. Like we're all the car. It's the UFL at the end of the day. I mean, I saw like, oh, Chase, what if he gets, he could be non-injured, come back in time to play the rest of the year. It's like, he's not coming back to play like the last week of the season if he's like on borderline. I mean, this isn't Lamar Jackson, like game time call here. Like we're trying to get to the playoffs. Like you just need to be kind of, just realistic about kind of where all this is in the world, I think, and in terms of people's health. Like, and last point, it was like the AJ McCarron thing. Like he needs to come, like, the guy's playing. It was like the McLeod Bethel Thompson. Like Pat's always on this. These guys have lives. Like these have families. They have other things to do than go play 4 weeks of spring football or whatever. For it's good money, but it's it is what it is.
I give AJ McCarron all the credit in the world for coming back. That's a great name to bring up because he really had no reason to, and he didn't have to. He's proven it. He proved it last year. He was spectacular, and now he comes back to an even better arsenal. But there's no guarantees with that. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen. You could get hurt, like you said. And then, he doesn't have a chance to go back with the Bengals and be a backup. But he decided he wanted to come back. So all the credit to him. But this is always an individual decision made by every player. And you can't really assume just based on what you're projecting them to do in the league or what they could do in the league or what kind of clout they could get again. I think that's a little overvalued in my opinion. It's great. I am thankful for whoever comes in and decides to play. I'm thankful that's we get continuity like Perez, like McCarron, like some of the Birmingham players. It's great, but it's not guaranteed.
Getting a lot of calls here. Philip's starting to hear the Sharman Jones. Like he's so out of football now. Didn't he go try out for a CFL team last year? Or wasn't he on the training camp like for the Elks or something?
He was, yes. Okay, but again, the Elks have signed 827 quarterbacks since last offseason, so they'll sign anybody.
But I mean, no, like Sharman's out or Cardell's out. I mean, Cardell's out. Like last we spoke of Cardell, he was doing cameos in about 15 minutes for the podcast because he had so little going on. Like I don't think that he's involved in that. Leon, the other question we got to get. Ben Kurt's like done. I mean, he's like, I don't think he really liked his time with the XFL. I know he got hurt. I don't like how he handled any of that situation at all. I'm like, well, they said I'm signed to the league, and I don't even. I'm like, okay, well then, like the league's tweeting it out. This isn't like insiders. Like the league tweeted that you signed. Like at least at least it was far enough down that line. But I think Ben Kurt's out. Like I don't think that that's a possibility.
I don't think so either. I mean, once you make it as a media personality, you're pretty set. You don't really have any reason to have to move beyond that. Pat McAfee probably could have played a little bit longer in the NFL, but if he's got a media empire, he wanted to start. You don't have to do those kinds of things if you don't want to. And like football is a tough sport. Like I think football is really just a way of getting your name out there at the end of the day. It's not even just about making money. I mean, if you're playing in the NFL and you're a top player, awesome, fantastic. But that's not the reality for a lot of guys. Some of it's hey, I got to get my pension. I want to make a name for myself. Once I know that I made it, I'm out. I'm good. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. This is one of the most brutal sports on the planet. I get it. And so for me, I'm not beholden to the idea of somebody coming back just because they played in the league previously. I mean, sometimes, like you said, they have a sour experience. They don't want to do it again.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. Where you're talking about I think it's understated sometimes just how brutal football is. And it's like let me what was it? Joe Flacco did it last year, right? And that was like the greatest story in the world. He came off the couch and he came and played. He went to the playoffs. Like, that's not a normal thing that everybody does. They're going from the carpool line in and, they're calling plays at the line of scrimmage. Like, I just think that's understated sometimes. Like, oh yeah, you can just play another 6 weeks. It's like McLeod played an entire CFL season, got hurt, came back and then played an entire USFL season. Like, that's really hard. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. So
yeah.
Anything else from the Garbers of it all?
Like I said, I mean, it's just going to be really interesting to see if they trust someone like Dormady or if they try to swap for somebody else. But like you said, it doesn't matter how quickly they get them. They can't integrate them this week. They're going to have to wait. And that's the only downside. That's the one downside that I said, and I've advocated for before in these spring leagues. I want to see a bye week installed for these teams just to have a time to sort of recuperate and like have a mid-season break to be able to sort of reassess where they're at. I mean, the team that could really use it right now, for example, is Arlington. They need a bye week like no one's business. Same with Memphis. They're teams that need that, and also just for injury's sake as well. If they had a bye week, then maybe I could say, sure, maybe Garbers does come back, but I don't think that's really reality. But that extra week, I think, could do wonders, especially for trade possibilities too, because it's so hard to trade for somebody and then expect them to be integrated immediately.
We had a question here, and I was very dismissive of this. Maybe you won't be as dismissive. What are the chances to see a player like Zach Wilson come down and get some reps? I say 0.0%, at least for a couple years.
I don't see that happening at all. I mean, these former draft picks, especially first-round draft picks, don't grow on trees. They especially aren't going to be growing on trees that come down here. They don't want to really stoop themselves to this level. Look, guys like Johnny Manziel are an anomaly because Johnny Manziel just decided to flame out of every league in existence. That's his own methodology of going through life. So that's different. But as far as like the normal basic first round player, it's really hard to expect them because once you get a first round grade or you get drafted in the first round, you run around with that label for the rest of your life. And every coach thereafter thinks, even if your first team doesn't accentuate your talents, maybe they can rehab your career in some way, shape, or form. And that's just reality. That's a whole nother thing as far as how NFL teams evaluate talent from year to year, but that is just a label that teams can run with when they are trying to look at players and say, well, there used to be a first round pick. Maybe we can do something with them. And they believe it too.
All right, let's transition. We can do more roundup questions at the end here if we want to do anything else about Garbers. Let's talk TV ratings here. These came out today. I'm always like, oh yeah, because I always check everything and I go back to bed for a few minutes. I'm like, okay, yeah, these were this morning. Mike Mitchell here at the Saturday game, the ESPN DC Arlington. I'm just pulling up so I have the times on here. So that was the 1 p.m. Eastern. DC Defenders to Arlington Renegades, 534,000. The Memphis at Birmingham Stallions, that would have been the 7 o'clock primetime game, 8:37 on Fox. And then Sunday, ABC Houston, Michigan. That was the early one. That was at noon Eastern, and then 3 p.m. the St. Louis Battlehawks, Brahmas, they're hitting the million for that. General thoughts on this? I have a couple thoughts, but general thoughts.
It appears that the Saturday morning time slot is maybe the roughest of the entire slate, because that also was the case with Memphis and San Antonio last week. It doesn't seem to be an enviable time slot for a lot of people to be watching football. I think I'm going to be honest, there's people like me who probably would rather be doing chores on Saturday morning and getting all that done as soon as the weekend starts. But I mean, the fact of the reality is you're seeing a lot of these numbers come from the network televisions. I know ESPN obviously is, this is cable as opposed to having ABC and having Fox. So that does factor into it as well. But the time slot is also a big factor into it. And the night times, it looks like, as far as the Saturday night does pretty well. The midday game on Sunday does pretty well. And even the Sunday morning game does pretty well. Like, we had that Easter game with San Antonio that first week, and they seemed to draw at least a decent audience television wise, even when there was really no reason to. So this tells me that it looks like the one problem slot could potentially be Saturday morning. I know that's unavoidable for certain circumstances. And also, as Mike was talking about, there was the Ohio State spring football game on the same time as the DC game, which may have affected viewership. And that was over on Fox. So ironically enough, that same network may be drawing away from that audience. But, people are going to want to watch those games. Whereas with the Alabama game, the Alabama spring game, you had after the Arlington game and before the Birmingham game. So you were able to sort of sandwich it in between those two, and it didn't affect the viewership of the later game.
Yeah, I see. Time for UFL. We'll talk your question because we have the two games at the same time coming up next weekend. The issue too is it's also the ESPN, right? So it's early ESPN, and the game last week, the early game on Saturday, was early ESPN as well. So I had tweeted out, and we have I got here the bookmark from the Mike Mulholville or whatever with Fox. But to me, it's really highlighting, and this is what they've said, right? This is their game plan. We're consolidating. We're giving the best time slots and I've had this conversation with Brett and some of the guys in the Facebook groups today. Like, there's all this talk about, next week, that's the DC Defenders versus, the Stallions, right? And that's a really hot game. That's a big, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's a non-zero number, but to me, that what really dictates this, and we had this on with Ben Fisher last year from the Sports Business Journal. I'll reach out to him here probably like midway point once we have enough of a sample size to kind of talk through. But really, at the end of the day, it is the network and then the time slot that it's on, the matchups, and what are the standings? Okay, does this game have playoff implications? Like, as much as we all like to salivate over that, I can't wait for the Brahmas revenge game against whoever. Like, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, Fox is clearly carrying the day here. Really good rating for the ABC night game, but also that's the ABC night game, right? Sunday night, I think that there's X number of TVs in America that are tuned to Fox, X number that are tuned to ABC. That's why last year, the USFL in 2022 with the kickoff, let's do the simulcast on Fox and NBC, because then we'll get the double ratings, because there's, roughly about 1 million people that are going to be watching here, and roughly 1 million people that are be good doing that. I don't know. I think anything around 1 million is good. I think, if you're significantly under that, I think it's losing relevance. I think Ben Fisher said 500,000 and lower, you're probably, not necessarily hitting that on OTA. I'm not talking the ESPN one. I'm talking if you're on Fox, ABC, but, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's certainly not falling off a cliff for any guard.
Well, I mean, those FS1 games would score 200,000, which was just, that wasn't going to get it done. These numbers on network television certainly are encouraging, and it shows you that there is a floor involved here. Again, the floor is not as high as it was when it was XFL pre-COVID, but you still have a lot of numbers here to work with as far as the floor goes. And like you said, I agree. The matchup doesn't really matter to the casual audience. It's time slot, it's convenience. It's when people can be in front of their televisions to watch these games. And of course, you want to showcase the best games with the best audiences as well. That Arlington ESPN game, which from an attendance standpoint, it wasn't the greatest TV product, which we can get into later. But, that first St. Louis home game was on ABC at night on Saturday, like a 5 p.m. primetime matchup. That's great. That's exactly what you want. You want to put those kinds of games. I know they can't really do that in terms of being at the mercy of the venue availability and being able to have time slots that they want to work with, but you do what you can. I still think this is better than we've had in previous years. Obviously, no competition head to head with both leagues existing, and also the fact that you're not using channels like FX or FS1 to sort of put your games on, or Peacock, which was another one. So you're not cutting viewership that way either.
Just to put it in context, because I had a question here from Leon. What did the spring? I'm assuming you're talking about the spring league, but this is a good comparison. Because what did the spring games draw ratings wise on Fox? If we look here, and let me pull this up on XFL News Sub with a throwback. The spring league, the Brian Woods, cardboard box. I made a football league out of a cardboard box in my garage. 418,000 for their finale on Fox in the spring, and that was different times and COVID and kind of all that stuff. But just to put it in perspective, because when the USFL, season 1, oh my God, we're doing, I'm like, okay, it's such a jump from what the spring league was in terms of like, now we're paying the players, obviously we're paying the coaches, and we're doing the hub, and we're doing all this stuff, and we have all the, all these teams, and we're not just, playing basically like scrimmages and all that stuff, to get 200, 300 more thousand, it shows you kind of where that floor is. And so what do you make of that here? Getting 418 for the Mega Bowl, we're getting 800,000 for the UFL here, but it shows you like, there's even a floor below this, and it's really, that's always interesting to me, because the spring league was not a league.
The spring league was a proof of concept that honestly I've grown to appreciate more as time has gone on, because the fact that it was basically operating on the budget of a Diet Coke. And to me, that was a testament to how the players played, and also the fact that you could just put football on TV and it work. Now, I do not believe in that concept for the UFL, because there needs to be more effort put into presenting the product, because it has to be a TV product. Now, if you're going to say it's a TV product, then start pretending like it's a TV product. You can't just put it in front of people and have a venue full of 15 people in a drone and expect it to sell. That doesn't work. Like the Mega Bowl was the baseline. I thought that was basically an experiment, and then it spilled over to the Birmingham hub, and it was not an enviable TV product. So that is something that I think was lost in translation there, at least on Fox's end. But it does show you that there is a baseline interest in the sport, which is great. But you have to work on that and be able to build on that if you're going to present it to the public.
Okay, so I guess the spring games were the Ohio State spring football games, as you're saying. Well, so that's another good comparison as well. But I like talking about the spring league any chance I get. Maybe I'll wear my Jousters jersey next week. So yeah, there's certainly a floor here for, I think, for football of any kind. I had tweeted out, at the end of the day, the time slot is really all that matters. People don't care if it's XFL, USFL, UFL, QFL. Like, we just, it's football on in the place where I can easily find it. That's good enough for me. Do you agree, disagree?
For now, that's just the reality, and it's not really going to be about the matchups. Maybe some people will become familiar with a Battlehawks brand or a Stallions brand or a Defenders brand, but that takes time to build that relationship with people. And for now, they're just another league, another football league with a bunch of random teams that most people don't know about. And that, to me, tells me that you have to have a good time slot to show these games.
Yeah, I'll be curious to get Ben's thoughts. I have a feeling I know what he's going to say, just because we obviously had him last year. Mike here has a question: replace ESPN with NBC? That'd be a major coup. Yeah, if wishes and butts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Like, it's at a certain point, you're not like, this was pulling teeth to get to this kind of merger here that we have going on. Generally speaking, the TV networks are like, hey, buddy, like, do you want to work on this with me? Fox wanted to get involved in this, obviously, bit off a little, maybe more than they thought they could. Redbird's doing all this stuff. They weren't finding the return on investment they wanted. It was very fortuitous circumstances right now, but that's generally not how major TV networks work.
No, it's not. And also keep in mind, NBC was burned by the XFL in 2001. But I know it's time has passed, so maybe tempers have cooled since then as far as the relationship. Obviously, they took on some of the USFL games last year and the year before, so they were willing to share in that load a little bit. But look, ESPN and ABC are invested in this product, and I can't really fault them either way. It's not an idea of people aren't watching ESPN. I think it's just more how are they presenting the product, because people clearly will watch ESPN for other things like women's basketball, and that's not a problem. So I think it's more of how it's being presented, and that you can go into TV presentation and all that if you want to. But that to me is more of the story here, as opposed to let's just throw it over to another network and let them have the numbers. I don't think that's really sustainable. It's good to have that here. I think you need to work on building on the audiences on all fronts. ABC, ESPN, Fox. You need to be able to build into the audiences that you have right now, because that's where your familiarity with that audience is. People aren't flocking to NBC to watch spring football.
Yeah, Leon had a question here. How many USFL and XFL games topped 1 million last year? The USFL only had the two, right? And Mike's comment on here, it was the championship game, and then the one where they had the the whole Kentucky Derby, and they popped that rating coming into all of that stuff. But XFL, I'm sure Max is on here and can do that stuff. If Max is still in the chat, I'm sure he can pump that out. Yeah, Mike, XFL had more than 2 last year. Let's see here. We have a $5 super chat. That's exciting, Andy. We're rolling in the money right now. Let me get this out. From Coach sipping Jamba Juice out of a straw. Appreciate that. I don't know if I've seen you on here before. Please everyone like and subscribe. Like I said, big show coming up on Friday. Dave Naylor, Paul Reese, USFL historian. Do you think the league underestimates the value of a UFL films in the vein of NFL films circa 1960s, 70s in terms of marketing? I think we're trying to do the best we can right now. I think we did the Player 54 thing, and I don't necessarily think they saw the return investment on that. I know we did the United by Football thing. I will tell you, I think it was week 3. They hadn't uploaded the new episode yet. They had re-uploaded the weeks before, and I did not hear one peep of anybody on it until I went on to try to watch it on demand. So I can tell you, the viewership isn't necessarily outstanding there. Andy, any other thoughts on that? I think maybe in a couple years down the road. I don't know if there's even the UFL Today show. I know we champion okay, we're doing this and this is good, but I don't know how much appetite there is.
I mean, I love to have a pregame show, but I don't know if that's there either. I don't know if the appetite is available for something like that. And for UFL films, I mean, it would be great to have that. It really would. I just don't know if they have the allocated resources. I mean, they're already dealing with things like social media and community marketing and other things that I think I'd rather them work on first before we really worry about things of that nature. But yeah, it would be a great way to promote your product and promote the league and promote your brand. I just don't know if that's really a priority right now, considering other things that I would rather they work on. But sure, that's something that I would like to see from the league eventually.
Max, yeah, six XFL games for the over the million. The other thing as well, comment. I guess we've never talked about this on the show. Talking about we never got to cover the destroying injury, which I shouldn't laugh at. But I guess that happened right as I was flying out. But another blow. I don't know if I can say exactly what I said in the group chat last night, because Dorothy came home and I said, "Hey man, the Brahmas quarterback got injured, Chase Garbers," and she's like, "Oh, what's?" She's like, "Man, the Brahmas are really having a lot of injuries." I'm like, what's his story, about the Brahmas? She goes, "Well, no, that annoying YouTuber that you don't like." I'm like, "Oh God," because we had been to LA and all that stuff. But yes, we the Donald DeLahaye. Any comments on the destroying injury? Because we never really got to that.
Well, you certainly started a firestorm before that even happened because of the video of him doing the tackle. But I can get into that in a second. But I'll say this first: destroying, it's unfortunate, and I feel for him because it was a cool story. He obviously made a lot of notoriety. A lot of people who wouldn't have followed the league otherwise were following because of him. So he brought in an audience. Now, from my standpoint, it's fascinating to see a player celebrated so much who had never even attempted a field goal in the league. That I've never quite seen that. I can't, just for my money, and no offense, just not offense to him or anything. It's hard for me to characterize you as a star player when you literally don't record anything on the stat sheet as in your primary position. I mean, obviously he'd done special teams things. He'd done kickoffs and he had tackles to his name, but he had never attempted a field goal. And San Antonio didn't attempt a field goal until this past weekend when he was out. So for me, I mean, it's a fascinating phenomenon that happened with him, but it just goes to show that you got to be ready for these games. And as far as filming and being part of something really special, that's cool. But at the end of the day, it's a brutal sport, and it can chop your head off in a second. It can take you out immediately. It can all end in one fell swoop. We've seen that with other players. So I feel for destroying that aspect that it just ended so abruptly, but that's kind of the reality with the sport. And we've seen that for many guys who don't get nearly as much notoriety.
Yeah, Jared here has a good comment, and this doesn't need to be a whole tangent on Deshaun right now, but I agree. I agree with the thought process. Right, this is someone big. We're going to bring him on to do. I have lived through my entire life, and thankfully now WWE is at a point under Triple H where they are confident in being a pro wrestling brand. I lived through 25 years of whatever I was watching, the Vince McMahon of we need to find other cooler people than we are so they can come in and then they'll bring in their audience, right? We'll bring in David Arquette back in WCW. He'll win the championship. We'll bring in, I remember Jeremy Piven came on, like Entourage is hot. Like, let's bring on Bob Barker. I mean, they did this whole thing and every week it was like, we were giving away money at one point. And like, we're just like anybody that's cooler, just be confident in your brand. Just be confident in your brand. Like, I think at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have destroying a part of it. I just don't think we need to be falling over ourselves. Like, this is so incredible. Like, that's my 2 cents. Max was asking for this, and I'm doing this under protest because I think this is rude. But when Destroying posted his neck brace meme, and now keep in mind, this is a very serious injury. Like, I'm glad he's safe, and thankfully he's going to be fine. But I mean, it really is a new meme. Right, Andy? I mean, this really is, right? Am I wrong?
I don't know if he's selling it as a meme. I know you are. I wouldn't have gone that way, but for me, I don't know how much light he's really making of his injury here. But
I know, but it's a little bit. It's a thing. It's a thing. Sorry, I just had to. Max was asking for it. It's the thing.
It's a little bit of an envelope push. I'll just say that.
Okay. Let's talk about anything else on that. We'll talk attendance here because we got to talk some actual football. But I want to have it because we had a comment about the building local fan bases, all that stuff. So you want to move to attendance?
Always.
Okay, so we have this, and I'm going to have again Paul Reitz on the show this week talking about some of the USFL markets. Birmingham showing up here with the 12,000 for their home opener, high water mark of the weekend. That stadium, we have a whole breakdown of, I think Stefan and them made it, but Max checked the numbers. We'll do all that deep dive with Paul Reese about attendance and all that stuff on Friday. But 12,000 for Birmingham, Arlington, the new low for them, Michigan, continuing a 3-week decline. San Antonio, if that darn stadium wasn't so big, I think that would maybe feel a little bit better. What did you make of the attendance this weekend?
Disappointing is the word I would use, but here's the reason why. And I want to go into a couple things here. First of all, for Arlington, I mean, it barely looked like anybody was in the stadium when they first started the game. And our colleague Anthony Miller had noted as such, this was going to be a low attendance game, and he was right. I'm not quite sure what happened here because they drew 14,000 their first game against Birmingham. Maybe the novelty of playing another XFL team wore off, but the people just did not show up. And it is the lowest attendance they've had ever. Any of the leagues that they played in, the 2020 version, the 2023 version, and now this version. They've never had so many low attendance numbers. Now, I know the team had started off 0-2, but they've gotten off the slow starts before, and that didn't stop people from coming. So something was lost in translation here. Really disappointing on that end. Birmingham. Okay, look, I've had just about enough of all these Stallion fans coming out every week and saying, look, you don't understand this league. These people really care about Birmingham. They care about Stallions football, back to back, whatever. There's all these people that really care about Stallions football. I'm sure there are. They're not showing up to the stadium. Half the stadium is empty. You pack everybody on one side. It looks awkward. I don't know what it is. Either it's a Celine Dion concert, or it's a gas station opening, or apparently it's the Alabama spring game now. All of a sudden, that seems to be the other aspect of it. I don't know what excuses. I don't want any more excuses. You have a back-to-back champion. You have a consistent football team. You have notoriety. You have success. You have history. You have everything you need. Why aren't people showing up? I want to know. I got to know. And you know what? Maybe the answer isn't there in plain sight for a lot of people. Maybe it's Fox's undoing. Maybe it's the fact that there's things around Birmingham that are stopping people from wanting to go to the stadium. And I know I got heat for it for writing an article 2 years ago about how the infrastructure was less than desirable around it, and people took issue with that. Well, you know what? You can keep taking issue with it, because there's got to be something here that's stopping people from going to the games. Because what's the excuse? This team is getting significantly outdrawn by the Battlehawk brethren, who have just about more than 3 times as much as attendance as they do. They get outdrawn by DC. I mean, people were celebrating. I saw somebody celebrating this week where they were showing the attendance numbers and the percentage of the stadium that they're filling out. It's 26% of the stadium that it filled out. And someone's like, great, we're 3rd place. Like, that's not an accomplishment to sell. I'm sorry. It's not. It's really not. This Birmingham team has to draw better. I'm sorry. End of story. Like, I don't want to hear any more excuses from the Stallions fans.
Nate here. How can there not be a smaller stadium that's usable? They're into like the whole. They're in like a deal with Protective, right? Wasn't that in the whole? I mean, I think now maybe this is year 3 and we can move on from that. But I agree with that. I don't know. I think the 2022, the 8,700 home games or whatever for all the teams. I think they really did. Just really hard there for unreversible damage for that Birmingham brand, because last year, these numbers are down compared to last year, and even last year was down compared to the time before. So I don't know. I agree with you, because we're talking, and we had a comment from Jacob. The Houston game next week could be really rough, because the Rice Stadium of it all, and Houston's not good, and I don't know. I agree. Attendance isn't the end of the world, right? And you always see that, like, oh, it's the TV ratings. It has been widely proven here now for 2 years that people do not like to watch football with empty stadiums. It makes you feel like you're back in COVID. It's really weird. It doesn't look right. Even like I watched the Mariner game last night, Monday Night Baseball, it's a crowd, it's fine. And the Mariners aren't on the hottest star, but it's a Griffey bobblehead night. Like, it was fine. You just you got to have some sort of energy in there. And when you have some of this Michigan with the 6,900 people in that Ford Field, is like, it is rough. And then to me, it compounds, because then if the game's slow, and then it kills the audience even more. Like, it's just a compounding effort at that point.
Yeah, it kills the energy level. I mean, that's the attendance of like high school football championships in the state of Michigan. That's the kind of number we're looking at. And like, I'm sure state of Michigan football in high school is great, but like, that's for a pro league, that's not the number you need to be drawing. You got to pump that up. Now, 3 home games in a row doesn't help to start the season, so that does tax your audience a little bit as well. But I mean, the proof of concept of being in an NFL city hasn't really bared out for the USFL here, or the UFL, I guess, in this case. For San Antonio too, I mean, I have to keep myself from framing it in this reference, but I can't help but keep looking back at those Commander games and back in 2019. But the thing is it's a different audience, and it's a market that's been burned. It's been burned before, and I think they all remember that. They have that skepticism. For San Antonio, they've got to find a way to build that audience back, because the Alamo Dome can be really cool when it's filled, but at the time being, it's still kind of cavernous with how many people really go to those games. So look, there's work to be done on all fronts. The only teams that are really doing their job are DC and St. Louis. They both have rabid fan bases who are crazy, who are enigmatic, who have personality, who have specific traits to them that you can point to immediately, that continue to increase their attendance instead of decrease. They both have success. They both have identity as football teams. You can draw on that, and that's the crown jewel of your leagues. But that's 2 out of 8 teams. It's got to be more than that. It's not going to be enough to really be sustainable as far as a marketable entity. Like, you can't just rely on those 2 teams. There has to be more work done for these other squads.
Well, it's not a couple of things. I have a little bit of a rant here. I mean, it's not lost on me that, the 2 most successful of any of these brands are 2 XFL 2020 brands, right? Battlehawks and Defenders. I hate, and just as someone that's been, we've all been a part. I mean, you've been a part of this as long as I have, but like it's been a part of this now. Just how we've gotten to this and these markets and everything is the most backwards way of building the football league ever, right? XFL 2020, okay, we're setting that up, okay, and that was its thing, and that died. USFL, Birmingham, Alabama was the only place that would pay, and they could come up with a deal to do that. Okay, so we're going to do a hub there because, the taxes are right, and they're giving us a benefit, and we can use the stadium, and there's all these different reasons why we're going to do that. Because otherwise, you would never choose Birmingham, Alabama to be the home base of any football league ever, right? There's just too much competition with college. So then the other 7 markets are, well, these were the trademarks that we could acquire from the 80s. There was no thought process of like, well, should we even go to Michigan, or should we go to Tampa Bay, or should we go no, it was, and they had quotes about this, like, well, these were the trademarks that we acquired, and this is what we're going to do. So then you have those 8 teams now, right? And then when the XFL, a little bit of thought process. Okay, we got to bring Seattle back. Okay, obviously DC, St. Louis, the Vegas thing we've talked about. And then we're doing all these Texas teams because we're doing the hub. So again, you would never put 3 teams in Texas, but now we are. Well, now with this merger, it's like you're keeping the worst out of a lot of these, except for the 2, right? You would never choose Memphis, Michigan. Like, these are not markets that you would choose to do this. You would choose Oakland, San Diego, St. Louis. You would choose these NFL markets that got left out. And I know there's all the other logistics, but just there's no like rational reason why these are the 8 teams right now, unless you've seen how all this has gone down. Like, nobody would pick these eight cities in any map of the world of how to have a football league.
I mean, that's the thing. That seems like not just a logistical decision, but there's also a little bit of emotion mixed in there, right? The St. Louis fans want to prove to Stan Kroenke, you left us on the side of the road and you were wrong. DC fans proving to Dan Snyder, hey, we really don't care about your team right now because of the way you've operated it. We're going to go over here instead. And they've managed to draw enough. We'll see what happens with the Commanders going forward and if Josh Harris is able to bring those people back. But they've managed to establish themselves in a market that needed them. So for these other markets, I mean, Birmingham sounded like a cool concept, but it just hasn't really borne out that way. And same thing with Memphis. People talked about how great it seemed like having football in Memphis was. Well, it hasn't really borne out that way. And same thing with Michigan. The fact that they're just kind of relying on these IPs and these old markers of, well, this was really popular in the 80s, so why isn't it popular now? Because the market's changed. Things have changed. The demographics have changed. The communities have changed. You have to do your research on those. And for me, again, like, I'll always advocate for a team to come into San Diego. I always will, because one, it's the same feeling. A lot of people are spurned by the fact that the Chargers left, but also the city is building back its sports identity. They're adding teams now. They're starting to put teams back into the system, and they're starting to get themselves back on their feet after being burned by so many different teams and markets for so long and bad ownership. That's the thing. You have to know what the people are looking for, and maybe not every market has this, but maybe some markets just want to thumb their noses at an owner that completely abandoned them. And for other leagues and other cities, there might be different reasons. But I agree with you. It doesn't seem like there was always not forethought on placing these markets in the first place.
And they always dangle that, like, oh, well, we chose okay, Memphis might have an owner lined up, right? Mike has said, Memphis, and that's why they did, and it's the FedEx guy or whatever. Like, you're not buying this franchise. It's averaging 7,000 fans. It's certainly not for anything that the XFL or that the UFL is going to part with. I mean, that's like, this idea of I'm going to buy and then I'm going to spend my own money. I mean, this is a CFL thing all over again. Like, people own CFL teams because it's like a cool thing to do. Because I can't own, obviously they're not going to buy an NFL team. Like, I can own the Tiger, Bob. Well, I guess Bob Young's different because he really wanted to build it back up. But we own these teams to be cool and to be able to kind of show off, and we spend our money until we're done spending our money on it, and then we pawn it off on somebody else. I had one thing here, and then let's get to some football. We'll probably go a little bit over an hour, but we'll try to get out of here decently. And I love that he comments a lot. Could Michigan playing in the Dome be an issue? I live in Michigan. There's always an issue. There's a car wash that's having a sale, and there's a bookstore opening, and they're like, there's always a reason. And I am tired of that. If everybody like, well, actually, this 7 counties over, and they're having I remember when the Savannah Bananas, like that's why Birmingham can't draw. It's the Savannah Banana. Like there's always something. And I just, I mean, I said the same thing with Seattle. It's cracking, and that's why people don't want to go. And it's, especially when you're playing at exactly the same time, 3 miles away, like that is a little bit of a reason, but otherwise there's always going to be an issue.
Yeah. And I think it's something that you've touched on before is just, getting these guys into the community and being able to be part of the community instead of working out of a hub and then being transplanted into the community after the fact. I mean, you want to integrate these players and be able to get people on board with your product. I mean, like one example I can think of in recent memory, which is just drawing bananas numbers all the time, is this team down here called the San Diego Wave. I mean, before they even played a game, I was seeing stickers of theirs on people's cars and hoods all over the place and thinking, man, this is a women's soccer league team that is getting this much notoriety. And they got some notable players like Alex Morgan and such to play for them. But the fact that they were able to just kind of put themselves out there as an expansion franchise in this league and immediately just draw numbers. I mean, they are selling out this 30,000, 35,000 seat stadium sometimes, and it's nuts because it's a league that people in most cases would just say like, what, NWSL? Okay, I don't know what that is. And they're doing gangbusters because of the way that they integrated themselves into the community, and they do all these player signings, and they go out and they encourage girls to play soccer in the area, and there's some local people. I remember the San Diego Fleet, not to get on too much of a tangent, but the San Diego Fleet, they had some partnership with this fitness center down here called Orange Theory, and there were guys who were getting sponsorships to go work out and like be part of like some different branches with that company around the area, and get people be like, oh, you're a football player? Okay, so where do you play? Oh, okay, you play for this league. And like that's how it starts, because again, your average Joe's not going to know this, and that has not been done by this league. It's been more of the corporate mindset of let's just get our numbers, audience wise, whatever it is what it is. We want the TV ratings. Let's just get that interest instead and try to draw national interest. But you have to start from the grassroots first. And we've seen that.
A couple comments here, and then we'll talk games. I had a comment from, and I agree with this, and this is going to be more the discussion I want to get in with Paul Reese on the show Friday. USFL's ticket model really sandbagged them, and you create an expectation that you don't have to pay for tickets. Fans won't show up when they do. I mean, I do think that this, hey, come $5 and get a beach towel, and we'll do all the, and the WWE stars are going to be here. Like, we're doing all this stuff, and then now it's like, you want me to pay $70 for like whatever it is for the ticket? Like, I don't want to do that. The other thing I laugh at this, Jared, buy a UFL team when they are small, then sell later for massive profit. Yes, that is, because Philip asked this, right? Like, it's like, this is what they're all, this is like the model, right? We want to get the local owners and all this stuff. Like, if I had any amount of money in the world to buy a team and put it in Seattle, I wouldn't do it right now. Like, you're not buying, there's no product to buy, right? If you had done this and, if 2 years ago the USFL had done things correctly and rolled out, maybe by year 5 you are enticing people to buy into this stuff. But otherwise, like, what am I buying? 6,000 people showing up. I mean, that's not a gate. That's not even enough to run some of these gates, the venues anyway. Like Lumen Field, to run that, you're bringing 8, whatever. What was the XFL average in there last year? 10,000 at Lumen, 12,000. Like, Lumen Field costs a ton of money to run. Like, I know that because I've talked to Sam Schwartzstein about the numbers that were involved in that and how they didn't think that they were even going to do it there. So this whole idea with that, I don't know. I'm enough of a rant on that. Anything else? And then let's do a little football before we get out of here.
Well, just to touch quickly on the MLS thing, I think it's fascinating that, in my time sort of talking about it, I mean, this is a league that I quite frankly don't spend much time watching if we're just talking about a different sport. But the fact of the matter is, what do they have? They have a TV deal with Apple Plus TV. They have slowly expanded franchises. The expansion fee for the San Diego team next year is upwards of $400 million. I mean, for an expansion franchise in the MLS, for a league that seemingly most average people don't care about. And obviously I get told by, all these people that I teach in my regular job, all these European students and Brazilian students, and all that. I'm like, oh, it's an insignificant league and no one wants to play there. Messi's obviously going to destroy everybody by playing in it. It's like, okay, but it makes money. Like, it appears to make enough money that people care about it and invest in the product, and it keeps expanding. But that's because they don't focus on just, television audience. or the spectacle of it. Look, why, the giveaway thing. Why would do you think I'm going to a Padres game for the giveaway? No, I love going to Padres games because they're fun and they're part of the atmosphere. Like, do I want to
I
meet
do go to
kids?
some for giveaway. I'm going tomorrow
I
for
like
giveaway.
I like getting a knit beanie as much as anybody, but that's not why I'm going to a game. I could buy that online,
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's probably what people are thinking about the other stuff. They're like, whatever, I could buy a spatula and slap my own logo on it. Who cares? Like, that's not the part of it. But maybe you're a giveaway person. I don't know.
All right, let's get into some of this stuff here. Just big surprise upsets for the weekend. We had the Battlehawks here over the Brahmas, 31-24. Panthers shellacking the Roughnecks. I was traveling. I was doing my best to kind of keep up on all this stuff. Birmingham obviously over the Showboats, as to be expected for their home opener, and then DC eking out a win. Biggest takeaway from that, and then let's start focusing on to next weekend. But just kind of any major takeaways from week 3.
The Renegades really just fell flat and be up 10 points with just a little over 2 minutes left, which they could have ran the clock down to this 2-minute warning. They mishandled that. It could have ran the clock down on the field goal attempt. They make the field goal. Then you kick it to Chris Rowland, who has been pretty good the entire game. He's made some big plays. He runs it back past the 50-yard line. DC scores quickly and is able to get a 2-point conversion. And then they get that 4th and 12 onside play, which is starting to become pretty easy for teams, at least as far as conversion percentage wise. It's definitely a lot more possible than the onside kick, and it's been converted 2 weeks in a row. And like San Antonio against Memphis last week, DC gets down the field. This time they just have to kick a field goal and they win. And just an absolutely devastating loss for the Renegades, who on offense, I can't fault them. I mean, Luis Perez almost throws for 300 yards. Tyler Vaughn, I don't know what DC was doing. They just thought it was optional to cover him all day because they weren't doing it, period. But DC's defense, man, and their special teams have just let them down this season. And it's not the same unit as last year. And that's really crippling them because they finally figured out their offense. They have consistent offense, but it doesn't matter because the other 2 units have just fallen by the wayside.
I have seen this a lot, and I obviously don't think we'll do it this season because we're not fan control football, changing rules in between games. But like, I think this conversion that it will probably be adjusted in the offseason if it's too successful, right? But hey, maybe they want it. Maybe they want to. Like,
it gives everybody a chance. Like, it gives your team a chance. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that with that, and then so I mean Birmingham, right? I mean, not too much of a surprise here, right? Pretty much took care of business. Anything stood out to you from Birmingham?
I joked in the chat. I said if Adrian Martinez can find a way to throw a pass, this team is going to be lethal. Well, guess what? He had himself an outing. This is frightening for the rest of the league. If Adrian Martinez plays like he did on Sunday, and he had a fumble too. He had a fumble in the first quarter. But if he is able to become any semblance of a consistent passer and really is able to utilize the full skill set that's around him, forget it. This team might run the table. I mean, this is really terrifying. They can run the ball. They can throw it now with Adrian Martinez, whose legs are obviously a tremendous asset. This team, they treated Case Cookus like a pinata. They beat him senseless. They killed him. I mean, they had 3 sacks in the first 4 plays. They just treated him like a rag doll. Bless him. I can't believe he even kept the way he just kept getting up, but just kept getting beat up. And then Troy Williams eventually had to come in. Man, this Birmingham team just has all the pieces. They really do. And they don't have to use someone like Jamar Smith. And we were wondering, is Jamar Smith going to come in? Well, this is a resounding no. He's not coming in because if Adrian Martinez is the guy, this is it. And it also, on a sideline note, I mean, this basically kind of ends the Matt Corral experiment, at least for now. So for Skip Holtz to just continue to get these guys, these quarterbacks to come into the system and play like this is just such a testament. And I'm sorry, I really just don't think the rest of the USFL has a prayer.
No, I agree with that. I mean, if you had asked me preseason and especially going in and even the first week and them, thoroughly taking care of business against Arlington kind of in the second half of that game. Panthers here, I mean, are we good? I mean, we beat the Roughnecks, so it's not a tall task. But I mean, is Michigan give you anything to be inspired about?
Their defense is what's going to carry them. Offensively, I mean, I think this is more of a byproduct of the fact that the Roughnecks are just lack of a better term, rough to watch. They just don't have much going for them on offense. Reed Sinet tried his best, but there's just only so much you could do. That interception wasn't even his fault. It bounced off one of the players' hands and ricocheted into the Panthers' hands. Look, EJ Perry is still a passer that I don't really envy. Now 16 for 19 is fantastic, but it's his legs. I mean, he's just a runner. He always breaks out of contain, and he's able to do these QB draws, and he makes a lot happen with his legs. Offensively, they'll do enough. Matt Colburn, I mean, that's awesome. Great 1-2 punch, Matt Colburn and Wes Hills. And if you get EJ Perry, they should be a running attack. They should focus on that. But their defense is really what their calling card is. And of course, you have Mr. Myers back there just bombing it away. I mean, the Panthers are probably your second best team and probably remain that way for the rest of the season. I just don't really give them much of a shot against Birmingham. But as far as getting back into the playoffs, yeah, absolutely. And that's a testament to the rest of the roster at least being cohesively built and Mike Nolan knowing what he wants to do with it.
Yeah, I saw RJ, I think, put RJ Young put the Panthers, I think, at number 2. And I was like, man, is he smoking? I'm like, hey, okay, you agree with that? We saw a bunch of comments like, hey, maybe Birmingham will trade Matt Corral now. I don't know. I don't see them doing that just for competitive advantage to the Brahmas, just because of all that. Speaking of that here, St. Louis, came in, took care of business against the Brahmas. St. Louis, are they picking up steam here at this point? I know it's been kind of slow going the first couple weeks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have such a bevy of running options now. And not only that, they're supposed to get Ja'Cour Pearson back very soon. He's apparently cleared the practice. So, I mean, you just continue to add to this arsenal for this team. Give it up for this team figuring out on offense with AJ McCarron just being the smooth operator. I mean, he's in full command of this entire operation. I like St. Louis a lot. Defensively, I'm still a little bit concerned about them, but from an offensive standpoint, I mean, they can score with anybody. They can get into shootouts, and they always have a chance. You got to think that as of right now, they're probably the favorites now, especially with the Chase Garbers injury. But, I mean, it's really a matter of them not getting in their own way. I think it's going to be really interesting to see them face off against DC. That's still, to me, one of the best rivalries in this league. And DC has completely owned it, but DC and St. Louis is still the thing that you have to really look at most, and who gets the most out of those victories is going to determine who wins this entire conference. But yeah, I love the Battlehawks offense. I mean, they're so tenacious, and Beck's really just, again, I like the way he coaches this team. I feel good about them going forward. As far as San Antonio goes, I hope they can find a signal caller. I really do, because it's really a shame considering what they accomplished the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I texted John Lewis because he had Brahmas as a one-win team, and I said, "You're crazy." And then Chase Garbers came out and lit the world up fire. I said, "Don't you feel foolish now?" Well, hey, maybe John Lewis is a sightseer here and can see
a soothsayer.
Yeah, maybe he and Mike. He can see in the future here. Wait, then let's do here. Real quick, we'll get out of here. We did have a question. What is Marquette's co-host name? That's the Professor Andrew Murray. So you can follow him on Twitter at Andy Paul Murray. So there you go. Coming up here this weekend, this is going to get controversial. We have the big triple header, but it's not really because 2 of the games are at the same time. Memphis going into St. Louis. Oh, I was going to say St. Louis against Birmingham in St. Louis for the championship is probably the best case scenario right now. I think that they, quickly, do you agree or disagree?
No, 100%. I mean, that from an audience standpoint, that's going to draw your biggest number. From an intrigue standpoint, I think those 2 fan bases going against each other would be fantastic. I believe that's what the league, like I said, and the league would never say it, but I'm sure they would love nothing more than that matchup to happen on paper, because that just is like a guaranteed draw for everybody. It gives us a lot of energy to look forward to as far as going there in person. But I mean, if DC recovers or one of the other team recovers, that'd be great. I do think what I'm curious about, because we saw this with the XFL championship game, there were fans from other teams that showed up that weren't in the championship game, and I gave them a lot of credit. It gave off a semi Grey Cup vibe where you saw representatives of other teams show up, even though their team wasn't in the big game. I wonder if that's going to be the same case here, or is it just going to be all St. Louis fans and then maybe a smattering of Stallions fans in there, or you're going to see representatives from other parts of the league. I think that's the sign of a really good, healthy league, is when you have people who care from other fan bases that still want to make it to the championship game, even though their team's not in it.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at St. Louis, I don't think they need any other team support to fill that dome. I mean, I think the fix is in. They want Dirty saw the turf truck. Say what the fix is in. We want we're fixing this, getting St. Louis here. But no, I mean, I think they could fill that stadium just with the Battlehawks fans. I mean, that place is going to be rocking. All right, I will say, viewership this weekend could be rough here. So we have Memphis going into St. Louis. That's on ABC. That'll be good. Then we have this double header at the same time. DC going into Birmingham. That will be, that should be an exciting matchup. We'll see how Birmingham does. Michigan at San Antonio. Both those are on Fox. I think it'll be region locked of kind of how, wherever you live. I don't know. I don't know if I get to watch either game. I live in Seattle. I live on the West Coast, but maybe they'll let me watch one of those. And then we got the Renegades at Houston on Sunday, standalone on FS1. I mean, woof, that could be a rough game. What are you looking forward to this weekend?
Well, the shame of it all is the two games that I really look forward to the most are playing at the same time. So, whoops on the league's part there. DC, I was not incredibly impressed with in their win over Arlington. I give Jordan Tomo all the credit for sticking in there. He made some tremendous throws on Saturday, but I don't know if this team really has it, especially defensively against the Stallions. They're in for maybe a rough matchup there, but I like the intrigue of DC traveling to a USFL team. I think that's the kind of the coolest aspect of this matchup. The Panthers and the Brahmas, I mean, it really depends what the Brahmas situation is at quarterback. I mean, it could be a good game. It could be a rough game. And I mean, rough from the standpoint, there may not be very many points. Is it very important for both? Absolutely, as far as the seeding goes. But I just don't know as far as a product goes. So I guess DC at Stallions would be the most intriguing of them all.
I agree with that. I do think DC is going to go in there and be like, you call this a home field advantage? We got, I think shots fired on that. No, that's probably good. I don't know. This is rough, this double up. I will, because people, they say, how are we going to watch these? I don't know. Like I said, I think it's going to be region locked. I could humble brag. I'm going to get my Apple Vision Pro and I'll VPN and I'll just have both games simulcast one to each eyeball. That'll be how I do this. But yeah, this could be tough. This is when you get, plus we're getting into the midseason, the novelty is worn off. This could be when you get the Mike Pereira or Mike Florio. I always do that. The Mike Florio, is the UFL doomed ratings? Because I do think this weekend is going to be pretty bad.
Well, as far as their competition goes, I mean, again, they're competing against themselves in this case, and I still just don't really understand that model at all. But we'll see how that experiment works. I'm very curious to see what that means in terms of the head-to-head, literally head-to-head matchup that they have.
This is my conspiracy theory, and I said this when they announced it, because with them, because I think it's two. I know it's at least two, if not 3 weekends, but it's at least 2 weekends where they have the double simulcast on, the Fox. Because that allows them to say we have 4 Fox games on that. Because if otherwise, if they're putting that game on FS1 or whatever, then it's so it bumps those numbers of, hey, look, see, we've getting we're really pushing all this out. We have 80, 18, whatever on ABC, and then we got 37, whatever the numbers were. I think that's part of it. It could be an experiment too, right? Kind of hey, see how this works and whatever. But I don't see how this works out anything well. I think it just gives them more numbers on OTA cables that they can talk about.
I mean, again, I just don't want to be barred as a viewer from watching one game because of a region lock, which again, we're on the West Coast, so does it really matter?
Who don't care about us.
We'll report back to see which ones they actually give us, if they give us any.
Yeah, Abdul says I'll probably get the Panthers Brahmas games, because I couldn't even sure. fathom a guess of which of those. All right, let's start getting out of here. Andy, any final thoughts? If anyone has any final comments, otherwise we'll put this one to bed. Please, like I said, like and subscribe. I think we added a couple during the stream. USFL historian Paul Reese, is the USFL carrying its weight in the merger? Spoiler alert for the theme this week. I'm sure that will go over swimmingly well. And then we have Dave Naylor coming on, CFL Insider, and I'll get Dave. I'm sure he'll be like, I'm not watching, but we'll ask him about the UFL as well.
It continues to really be fascinating to me to see how these ratings and these attendance numbers develop, because again, this is new data I feel like we're collecting and sort of harvesting over. But at the end of the day, I just want things to work out for everybody involved. Me, Reed, and I know we have our our complaints and we put in a lot of work, but we care and we both care about what goes on here. I just hope that there's more consideration for what some of these trends are showing. But I'm really curious to see what happens this weekend as far as the ratings go.
Yeah, at some point, and we talked about this with the USFL as well, and this is similar now with it. Like, at some point, you go from breaking even or losing a little bit of money, and then you need to pull the trigger at some point. I do not think that these leagues are going to find ownership that they're gonna carry them over that finish line at that point, right? Like, I worked in news when I was starting my videography business. And I had, I spent like a year and okay, let me build up my clients. I'm going to do all that. And then eventually, got to the point of like, I can't accept any more, gigs because I don't have any more sick time. Like at some point, then you got to quit. And then okay, now maybe I'm going to take a hit for 6 months, but I'm going to be able, like these leagues, you're never going to be able just to be salving on this, kind of at this point. I just don't think they're ever going to get to that point with the local fan bases engaged enough by still being in the sub model.
No, I think breaking even is not the strategy you're going to have if you're going to get individual ownership. You must find a way to show some sort of level of growth that encourages them. And TV audience is good. I think attendance is even better, and profitability is obviously the ultimate goal. But they need to show that first.
Matt, excuse me, sorry, I'm sneezing. Max was talking about. I don't know if this is new. We have replica jerseys now as well. They don't know if they have the actual jerseys, but I don't know if anyone else has tracked that, because I think it was Gavin with the newsroom posted it yesterday, and I was busy yelling at people for not crediting Mike Mitchell. So I don't know if that's new. I don't know if all the teams have it, but I saw him posting them with that. So, hey, at least we have jerseys at this point. I mean, it's probably will ship by the end of the season, but we're doing there. So, Evan, thanks for checking in here, and yeah, we'll get out of here. Andy, anything else?
Good work as always, Reed. Really appreciate it, and always being flexible.
Oh, no, Andy's the flexible one. I appreciate us being able to do this. I mean that. Check back in Friday. Like and subscribe. Paul Reese, Dave Naylor, and hopefully a big name DC defender. Well, I didn't say it. Hopefully a big name UFL man. They'll get back to me, and then we'll see you guys. And then next week, we'll figure out what time we're doing all this stuff. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.